Hello and welcome to the David Haye versus Tony Bellew preview show. On the face of things, this looks to me like a mismatch. David Haye, the former unified cruiserweight champion, former WBA heavyweight champion of the world, versus Tony Bellew. Tony the Bomber Bellew, former or current WBC cruiserweight champion of the world. Used to fight as a heavyweight as an amateur. The fight has been announced for, I believe, March the 4th. Haye versus Bellew. David Haye, his last real fight was in 2012. Yep, 2012. He fought the same time of the 2012 Olympics. A few days before that was announced in London. Or it took off in London. Or it started. David Haye was fighting Derek Chisora. That was the last meaningful heavyweight fight that David Haye was in. That's the last time David Haye was pushed publicly, not privately, publicly. His fight against Derek Chisora. And if you remember that fight, David at Upton Park, being pushed very heavily by the much bigger man in Derek Chisora, and David was absolutely blown out of his backside that night, but pulled out a corker of a punch to stop Derek Chisora, who had never been knocked out before. This is a guy that went 12 rounds of Vitaly Klitschko, went 12 rounds of Tyson Fury, went 12 rounds of Robert Helenius. Two of them are noted big punches. And, you know, Chisora was, you know, nowhere close to being knocked out. But against Haye, he was laid out. So, you know, David Haye showing punch power in there in that fight. Since then, the two pull-out fights against Tyson Fury, the pull-out against Manwar Shah, then the injury, then the comeback against the guy who learned his trade via YouTube, Mark Demore, the Dominator, who had been dominated in a round by a guy called Digger. And then we had Arnold Jurjoff, or whatever his name was, the Cobra. And well, we all saw that happen, the farce of a fight. David Haye's career has been a bit of a joke since he's come back. And ironically, he's on a channel in the UK called Dave TV, which is known as a comedy channel. Fair play to David. He's got himself back on television one way or the other. And I don't know if he's taking the boxing public for a laugh, but the one fight that people wanted to see him in was against Shannon Briggs. Shannon Briggs, a proven puncher in the heavyweight division, even at 44 or 46, he's still a bona fide puncher, a guy that a lot of people in the heavyweight division know that throws big bombs, and a guy that has got, I think he's got the record for the most knockouts in heavyweight boxing. If not that, he comes pretty close. So I'll turn the volume up here. That being said, with this fight, why did David Haye not fight Shannon Briggs? Is Shannon Briggs a problem? Yeah, I think he is. Because if Shannon Briggs were to land on David Haye, it would shatter the career of David Haye. He doesn't really want to be getting hit by Shannon Briggs. So why take that fight? So David at this point is on a tightrope. He's saying, I don't want anything to do with Shannon Briggs. Why did he just not say that? Why did he end up telling Shannon Briggs, fight in my undercard and then I'll knock you out? Why say that? And then why go on television? And David goes on television and says, I'm fighting Tony Bellew. His excuse is because he's got a big mouth and he's been running his mouth. I want to shut his mouth. But Shannon Briggs has been chasing you all around the place, running up his mouth. You can see it all across YouTube, but yet you won't fight him. Funny thing is, Tony Bellew's done nothing at heavyweight. Shannon Briggs is the former linear heavyweight champion of the world. In fact, he's a two-time champion of the world. He won the WBO championship, and he also won the title. Did he win the title beating George Foreman? I'm sure he did. And then he had that big fight against Lennox Lewis where he badly rocked Lennox Lewis. Then obviously later on he fought Vitaly Klitschko and got basically taken to school, but most fighters get taken to school by Vitaly Klitschko. And he's come back, and everyone says, well, he hasn't fought anybody of note since he's come back. But anybody who says that, well, guess what? David hasn't either. So I think Shannon at 44, he wants one. I think he wants one big payday that's gonna, that he can close out on. He wants a world title shot, and he's in the mix now. He was meant to fight Lucas Brown, and it looks like Lucas Brown's out of the mix with more allegations of him and him failing a second drugs test. So Lucas Brown's out of the picture. So that leaves Shannon Briggs without an opponent to fight. David Haye has found himself an opponent in Tony Bellew, who got knocked out at his second attempt at a world title. First attempt at world title light heavyweight was against Nathan Cleverly. But before that, Bellew had been dropped in the light heavyweight division by Orville McKenzie and other fighters. Then he lost narrowly to Cleverly. Then he moves up to, then he fights for the light heavyweight championship of the world against Adonis Stevenson. One left hand. It was a brutal left hand, and that was the end of that fight. And Adonis Stevenson is one of the biggest pound for pound punches in the world. Tony didn't bowl too well there. Now Tony's deciding he got dropped by Makabu in his challenge for the WBC title. He got up and won the fight. Fair play to Tony for that. But getting off the deck against Makabu and getting off the deck against David Haye are two different propositions. Tony Bellew's first defense of the WBC title, he defended the title against BJ Flores, actually David Haye's good mate or best friend, or as Tony Bellew refers to him as his clubbing buddy. Now, Tony Bellew can say he's got power. Tony Bellew can say that he believes he's the best cruiserweight in the world. Well, I don't know if he is the best cruiserweight in the world. There's a guy who's meant to defend the title against is the #1 contender, which is Breedis. I think he has to get past him. And there's a man who just won the WBO title called Alexander Usyk. Alexander Usyk, who is arguably the #1 cruiserweight in the world. I don't think Bellew wants any of him. And then you've got Marco Huck as well. And you've got Denis Lebedev. So you've got all those guys there in the cruiserweight division. So, and you've got Gassiev as well, the Abel Sanchez fighter as well in the cruiserweight division. So Tony Bellew said he's #1 cruiserweight in the world. He may have the best belt in the division, which is WBC. Not sure if he is the #1 cruiserweight in the world. So he decides to step up to heavyweight to fight David Haye. Never fought at heavyweight before. He fought as a heavyweight as an amateur, but that's a different situation altogether. Against a guy he says isn't a natural heavyweight. Well, David Haye's been campaigning as a heavyweight a lot longer than Tony Bellew has. And if you look at the BJ Flores fight, he was getting hit with right hand after right hand after right hand after right hand. Now, if BJ Flores is hitting you with the right hand consistently, Tony Bellew, then you can't afford to get hit with David's best punch, which is his right hand. You'll think to yourself, if that right hand, which it will, land on Tony Bellew's chin, the fight is effectively over. there's nothing to suggest that Tony Bellew will be able to take a big punch from David Haye. He got up from Makabu. Makabu doesn't punch anywhere near the power of David Haye. He got starched by Adonis Stevenson. That was at light heavyweight. There's nothing to suggest that Tony Bellew at heavyweight is going to be able to take the power of David Haye. It's not just power. You also have to consider speed and movement. Tony Bellew doesn't have great footwork. Tony Bellew is upright, typical European type star fighter. And yes, he does throw good punches. Yes, he has got a good boxing base, good jab, good right hand, good left hook. But all his punches, you got to think David Haye has fought. He'll see those punches coming a mile off, and he'll make Tony miss and make him pay. This fight reminds me, it's a toss up between David Haye versus Enzo Maccarinelli and David Haye versus Audley Harrison. David Haye versus Audley Harrison because David Haye and Tony Bellew actually have some sort of a friendship going there, but they're just trying to get some beef so they can both make some good money. And then you've got David Haye versus Maccarinelli, same sort of thing. Both were punches, but David Haye much more sharper, faster hands, faster feet, more accomplished fighter, you know, and a suspect chin. So it kind of looks like that. And David Haye, if he's but then David Haye has not fought since 2012. See, the only thing is, how much is left in David Haye? How good a fighter is David Haye? Since 2012, 2016, you've got to call them the wasted years. 2017 now, you're 36 years old, and he's already had a successive fights behind him. He's never really got beaten up in his career, so you can't say he's been beaten up or he's been in many wars. That's a good thing about David. He hasn't got that. So he's well preserved in that sense. But outside the ring, how's he been treating his body? Has he been in the clubs all the time? I know he always looks like body Mr. Fantastic, but what's he been doing outside the ring? You know, how's he been looking after his body? Those supposed injuries he's had, how much of that will have an effect on David Haye? And why is the opposition being so poor in his comeback? And he doesn't want nothing to do with Shannon Briggs. You know, he did. Adam Booth has distanced himself away from David Haye. Even Adam Booth himself said he didn't know how much David had left. When's the last time he's been hit in the chin by somebody? When's the last time he's been backed up in a fight by somebody? So Tony Bellew's only chance and hope in hell in this fight is to hope that David Haye's fallen so far back and David Haye doesn't want it, and that his heart is no longer in the game of boxing, which Shannon Briggs would have tested, is to jump on David from the first bell, hit him hard, and see if he can hurt David Haye. But in doing so, going forward, in the sloppy manner he does, when Bellew throws punches, he leaves himself open to be countered. He's not defensively sound. Tony Bellew, he's okay when he throws his own punches, but when he throws his punches, in between him throwing his own punches, David can counter with one right hand and the fight be over. David is, I'm not overhyping David Haye, it's just what I've seen him do. Enzo Maccarinelli fight, Audley Harrison fight, and arguably he could be a better fighter under Shane McGuigan now than he was when he was under Adam Booth, because I think Shane McGuigan is working on different things with Haye. Again, we don't know. It all looks good in the gym. We need to see what he's like in a real fight. Is Tony Bellew going to give David Haye that sort of fight? I don't see it. Honestly, I don't. Too fast, too strong, too good. Tony Bellew versus David Haye at cruiserweight, I don't think would last that long. Tony Bellew, unproven at heavyweight, unproven chin at heavyweight, unproven punching power at heavyweight, unproven what sort of weight he's going to come in. Is he going to come in and really pack on the pounds? Is he going to come in as a cruiserweight, sort of like 215, 220, and try and come in as light as possible for speed? But speed, even Tony Bellew at his fastest is still like walking in quicksand compared to fighting David Haye. And like I said, it's the hand speed of David Haye and the power. And once that lands in Tony, David Haye is very best, gets Tony Bellew out of there within 2 rounds, like he did against Enzo Maccarinelli. David Haye at his worst, 4 rounds. But at some point in time, in those 4 rounds, Tony Bellew will get nailed. And when he gets nailed, that could be the end of the fight. The fight could actually have been a bit of a farce as well, because they'll talk a good fight. Whether this is going to be a great fight, I don't think so. Like I said, the only thing that makes this fight an interesting fight is how much David's got left. That's it. You know what Tony Bellew is going to do. He's not going to change. He's not going to make the adjustments. There's some fighters who can make the adjustments on the fly. Those are great fighters. Tony Bellew is not a guy that makes adjustments on the fly. You've seen that in his fights previously, and I don't think strategically or even physically that Bellew's got the ability to beat David Haye. And I remember him making a comment years ago, somewhere he said that David Haye, don't put him and David Haye in the same class. David has accomplished so much more than him. So Bellew knows, outside of all the woofing and all the talking, he knows what he's at. So for me, I wish Tony Bellew all the best. And it would be great if Tony Bellew could come out first round, put David on the ropes, and put him in a real fight. But like I said before, bigger men than Bellew have tried and have got knocked out. Arguably, more proven men in heavyweight division have tried, and I don't know. So for me, David Haye KO 3 rounds. It could be the first right hand that really connects clean from David, puts Bellew down, and unlike Makabu, David Haye is a brutal finisher. So that's it. David Haye KO 3 going into 2017. That's our preview for Tony Bellew versus David Haye. Let us know your thoughts on it. Does David Haye, does Tony Bellew stand a chance? How much has David Haye regressed? And could Tony Bellew beat the worst David Haye? I'm out. Take care.